Hi, welcome back. In today's video, we're going to go through why process mining POCs fail. And a lot of things we'll be going through, you could also find in our process mining success guide, which is a free guide. You're more than happy to download. The link is in the description below, and I think you'll find it very insightful, especially if you're going through a POC. So let's start today's video by defining the word failure of a POC. You could have a successful POC as far as a data connection goes. It could certainly show the process flow within inside the process mining tool. And your company and executives and team may still decide not to go forward with purchasing a process mining tool, which is ultimately, I would say, a failure of the POC because it has improved either maybe the technical value or technical piece of it, the value piece of it. And what are some of the reasons why? And you'd be surprised. It's not necessarily that it was the software. It had more to do with the way the project was structured. So let's first look back and think about how are a lot of POCs generated at companies today. At Doculabs, we're not seeing a lot of process mining software evaluations, which lead us to believe that a lot of the POCs we're certainly involved in are generated by the software firms. And when we come into these projects, we notice a few things. First of all, the way the POC is described and the way the company's approaching it is A, POC is going to be really quick to do. Very little IT involvement, low code, and you're going to get a tremendous amount of value, maybe even more value than the firm's worth, right? And it's almost at the very beginning setting it up for the wrong expectations because we feel that process mining is a tool that is innovative, that's going to change a company's footprint across their processes of the way they visualize their processes. And to think that a POC, which is going to be a small segment of a process, is going to all of a sudden drive all this value, and it costs very little to do a POC because they say it's almost free. The expectations don't meet the powerful kind of functionality of the tool. So, one of the main reasons POCs fail is because the objectives are not aligned with the company initiatives. So what do I mean by this? When you go into POCs, most of the time, the software vendor may say, well, you know what, we're looking for a few things. One, we're looking for data connectivity. Can we connect to your systems? B, can we derive a process map out of your system? And C, can we identify value? Which are all great parameters, and it certainly should be a parameter of a POC. However, it's just table stakes, right? In order to really make a POC successful, it has to be aligned with the company initiatives. And what do I mean by company initiatives? You may have a company initiative for customer experience. You may have a company initiative for growth, meaning you're expanding into different products, different geographical regions. Or you may have an ESG initiative that you're trying to tie to. Now, if your POCs on just procurement alone, let's say, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a great use case. However, the first kind of value item usually out of a procurement POC is maverick buying, which at most companies, yeah, there is a lot of value there. However, from an executive standpoint of view, especially from the C-suite, they're looking at those initiatives. And where they're going to make their investment is the ones that are going to drive those initiatives. So coming to kind of the executive roundtable is, with a maverick buying value proposition isn't going to be good enough and could potentially get the POC or ultimately the decision to buy the software denied, right? So really what you need to do if you're in a POC or if you're thinking about POC, understand what your company initiatives are, understand who the strategic people are in those company initiatives, really get to understand what they're looking for. And then you could shift your POC towards that. Now, that doesn't mean, for example, let's say if your company initiative is ESG, for example, that doesn't mean you're going to be able to get an ESG vendor scorecard out of the POC, right? But what it does mean is you could certainly identify data that's already in the POC that in the next first phase of your implementation is the ESG scorecard. And you can even start driving insights from the POC on what that scorecard would look like, what the value of that scorecard would look like for the ECG initiative, and that ultimately could lead to a potential purchase of a process mining tool and make it more aligned with the executives' needs at your company. Now, the second biggest kind of reason for failure of a process mining POC is the lack of education. And what we mean by this is a lot of companies will start out a POC with initial meeting of a demo. May have 5 to 10 critical people in that room. They will see the demo and they will say, yes, we'll go ahead and do this demo, right? Maybe free, so what the hell, why not do it, right? Or at very minimum cost, right? You do the POC, 30, 60 days go by, and then you have this executive readout. And you think you've done a great job. The firm you hired probably did a great job too. And then it really falls on kind of deaf ears at the executive readout. And there's no kind of point to go forward. And the reason that is because there's this big gap between education of the critical people involved from the beginning to the end. And what I mean by that is a few things. One, from that first initial meeting, there still may be open questions around what process mining is. So for example, they may not understand the automation functionality of it. They may be questioning, well, what's the difference between this and Tableau? Or they may even be asking, how does this drive a process map? And is it going to make my people look bad? So throughout your POC, what you really need to do is start educating the people of influence at your company on what the power of process mining is, and also what your long-term vision of process mining is. And you need to have a shared vision of this process mining journey in order to have ultimately a successful result at the end of the POC. So what do I mean by this? One is, first you need to map out who the critical players are at the company that needs to buy into this vision. Secondly, you need to meet with them on a regular basis during the POC to understand what they're unsure about, what they need to understand about process mining, and more importantly, what you need to understand about what's going to be part of their decision at the end of the POC. So it's a two-way learning curve there, right? It's not just educating the people that are involved in the decision making, but it's also educating yourself on what is the buying process at the end of the POC to make it ultimately successful, more than just the basic blocking and tackling of, yes, it shows that it derives a process flow. Yes, you could get data analytics out of it. Yes, there is some value out of it. You really need to understand what the buying process is, and you also need to educate everybody else involved of all the uncertainties that they have of how process mining could be a valuable tool for their organization. The third, and it really ties into the second piece of this, is not the appropriate proper executive buy-in. And what we mean by this is, a lot of time, again, these POCs are very positioned at the very beginning as low cost, quick, easy value. And when it's low cost, it ultimately is easy to do, and you don't necessarily need high-level executive buy-in, particularly the people who are going to be writing the check for the software. In order for the POC to be successful, you need to identify who that executive is at your company and really have them sponsor this project. And sponsorship is much different than being a champion or a cheerleader. Sponsorship means they are going to make this part of their overall strategy going forward. This is going to be a lever they're going to pull to make sure all their other initiatives are going to be successful. And they will be able to go to other executives and be almost able to go to other executives and articulate the value of process mining. So if you take into those three things, A, making sure your company's initiatives are aligned with the POC. Secondly, continuously educating yourself about the buying process as well as educating others about process mining and the power of process mining. And third, really understanding who the executive sponsorship is that's ultimately going to pay for the process mining tool will ultimately lead to a successful process mining POC. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. Again, a lot of this stuff is in that free guide in the link below. And if you're a subscriber, thank you very much for subscribing to this channel. If you're not, please subscribe. And also, please contact us if you have any questions at info@processminingiq.com. Thank you very much.